6 hikers were missing. Search teams were desperate. Then, an ordinary cab driver named Frank stepped forward and pointed to the map. "You'll find them here." Everyone was shocked. How did this man know? That night, Frank's 25-year secret would finally come out. Everyone who knew Frank Rodriguez would say the same thing. He was the quietest, most ordinary cab driver around. Been working in Cedar Ridge for 15 years. Didn't talk much to anyone. Just went home after work. But Frank had one skill that nobody had noticed. He was incredibly good at predicting the weather. He'd just look at the sky and give you exact times. Rain starts tomorrow at 3, stops at 6, and he was always right. His neighbors thought it was just luck. Actually, Frank's past held a very different story. Welcome to The Last Stand. Have you ever been lost at sea or tried to find your way in a major storm? Share your experiences in the comments below. Frank Rodriguez was 59 years old, medium height, brown-skinned, with calm eyes. Everyone in Cedar Ridge knew him, but nobody really knew who he was. He'd been doing the same job for 15 years, driving cab. Every morning at 6 a.m., he'd leave his house, get in his yellow taxi, and drive passengers until 8 p.m. He didn't talk much, just said, "Where we headed?" and minded his own business. But Frank had qualities people didn't notice. He always kept a compass in his car, never used GPS. And strangely enough, he was really good at predicting weather. Passengers would sometimes be surprised when they asked, "Frank, is it gonna rain tomorrow?" He'd look at the sky and give a definite answer. Starts at 3, ends at 6, and he was always right. Frank's daily routine was different from other cab drivers. During breaks, while others sat in the coffee shop drinking coffee, he'd study maps in his car. Not just Cedar Ridge maps, but topographic maps of the whole region. He knew the mountains, valleys, and wind patterns by heart. When he drove passengers to mountain cabins, he never got lost. Even on the most complicated trails, he'd find the right way. His strangest habit was at night. He'd stand in his backyard and look at the stars. His neighbors were curious about this, but nobody asked. Frank wasn't very social anyway. Even his wife Carmen was curious about her husband's habits. When she asked, "Frank, why do you always read maps?" He'd brush it off saying, "Just a habit." Saturday morning, October 15th, Frank got up early as usual. While drinking his coffee, he listened to the news on the radio. Weather reports were giving snow warnings for Cedar Ridge. Frank went outside and looked at the sky. Wind direction, pressure changes, cloud movement. He evaluated everything. "Starts tonight," he muttered to himself. At 9 a.m., he picked up his first passenger. Mrs. Henderson was going to the market. "Frank, is this snow really gonna come?" she asked worriedly. "Yeah, after 6 p.m. tonight. But first the wind's gonna change direction," Frank said. Mrs. Henderson was surprised he spoke so definitively, but didn't say anything. At 2 p.m., news came to town. 6 experienced hikers had left early that morning for a climb, but hadn't returned by evening. Their families were starting to worry. Search and rescue teams sprang into action. Sheriff Williams took coordination. Volunteer teams, fire department, Forest Service, everyone mobilized. Frank heard this news on the radio. After dropping off his passenger, he stopped and thought. He knew the hiker's route. Eagle Peak Trail, the most popular climbing route. But the weather was changing. Frank looked at the sky. Wind was coming from the southwest, but tonight it would turn north, which meant by 6 p.m., search and rescue headquarters had been set up. Maps were spread out in Cedar Ridge Elementary School's gym. Radio systems were installed. Volunteers kept coming and going. Frank parked his taxi and went inside. Nobody paid attention to him. They figured he was just a curious citizen. Sheriff Williams stood at the map, giving instructions to team leaders. Team A will search the east slope, Team B the west slope. Team C will search along the main trail. Frank quietly looked at the map. Search areas, wind direction, elevation. He was doing calculations in his head. At 8 p.m., the first reports started coming in. Teams had found some traces of the hikers, but not the hikers themselves. They'd left the main trail and taken a side route. When Frank heard this news, he frowned. The side route was dangerous, especially in bad weather, and now snow was starting to fall. Wind direction was starting to change too. Frank could feel it. Southwest to north wind would create air circulation in that valley. Sheriff Williams was talking to team leaders, looking worried. Visibility's dropping. We might have to call the teams back. That's when Frank stepped forward. Sheriff Williams, Frank said in a calm voice. I know where to look for them. Everyone turned to Frank. What was this cab driver talking about? Frank, this is a serious situation, the sheriff said. Please let us do our job. But Frank pointed to the map. Wind directions changing, southwest to north, which means. He put his finger on a specific point on the map. They'll try to take shelter in this valley. Search and rescue coordinator Tom Anderson was surprised. How do you know that? Frank hesitated. Was it time to reveal the secret he'd kept for 25 years? Because, Frank said slowly, I did navigation at sea for 25 years. Silence. Everyone was staring at Frank. Sheriff Williams asked in surprise, Navigation? U.S. Navy. Frank said. Served as quartermaster on destroyers. 1,980, 4 to 2009. Weather pattern reading, wind direction analysis, navigation. That was my job. Tom Anderson's eyes widened. 25 years in the Navy? USS Porter, USS Cole, USS Winston Churchill. Served on 3 different destroyers. Gulf War, Iraq, Afghanistan naval operations. Frank leaned over the map. Look, winds turning from southwest to north. At this elevation. He moved his finger. Pressure change is going to create an air pocket here. Experienced hikers will feel this and look for shelter. He pointed to a specific valley on the map. Blackstone Valley. It's wind protected, has natural shelter, water source available too. Tom Anderson looked at the map. That makes sense, but that's outside our main search area. Because under normal conditions, they'd have no reason to go there. Frank said. But with a weather emergency, an experienced mountaineer looks for shelter first, then signals. Sheriff Williams was uncertain. Should he trust this cab driver? Frank, Tom Anderson said, did you really serve 25 years in the Navy? Frank pulled out an old ID from his pocket. Petty Officer First Class Frank Rodriguez, quartermaster, retired 2009. Tom examined the ID. It was real. What if you're wrong? The sheriff asked. I'm not wrong. Frank said, ocean or mountain, wind follows the same physics. Pressure systems, air movement, natural shelter. It's all the same. Tom Anderson made his decision. I'm directing Team D to Blackstone Valley. Frank nodded. But don't just direct them. I'm coming too. You're a civilian, Frank. I'm a navigator, Frank said with determination. At 9 p.m., Frank, Tom Anderson, and a 4-person search team headed toward Blackstone Valley. Snow had intensified. Visibility had seriously dropped. Frank's predictions were proving correct. Wind direction had completely changed, blowing from the north and creating air circulation in the valley. Look, Frank said, not looking at GPS. After we cross that ridge, we'll descend into the valley. Natural shelter should be on that side. Tom Anderson looked at his GPS. The coordinates Frank mentioned were correct. The team began descending into the valley. Frank was leading, as if he'd known this terrain for years. At 10:30 p.m., they saw lights. 6 hikers had set up shelter in a natural cave. They were all healthy, just waiting out the weather. Hey, called out lead hiker Mike Stevens. How did you find us? Tom Anderson pointed to Frank. This man predicted where you'd be. Mike was surprised. This cab driver? Frank smiled. Navy navigation background came in handy. The hikers were rescued, safely evacuated from the valley. Thanks to Frank's expertise, the search operation was completed in 45 minutes instead of 3 hours. When they returned to Cedar Ridge at midnight, a large crowd was waiting. Hikers' families, volunteers, reporters. Frank quietly tried to walk to his taxi, but Tom Anderson stopped him. Frank, wait a minute. He spoke to the crowd. 6 lives were saved tonight, thanks to Frank Rodriguez's navigation expertise. Everyone turned to Frank. Who was this ordinary cab driver? He served 25 years in the U.S. Navy, worked as a navigator on destroyers. Tonight he used that knowledge to find the missing hikers. The following week, Cedar Ridge City Council organized an honor ceremony for Frank Rodriguez. A small but meaningful ceremony was held in the town square. Mayor Patricia Johnson spoke. Frank Rodriguez served our country at sea for 25 years. Now he continues serving his own community. Captain William Hayes, retired captain of the USS Porter, came specially for the ceremony. Frank was one of our best quartermasters. His navigation skills were exceptional. Frank was given the key to the city and the title Honorary Search and Rescue Navigator. Frank wasn't just a cab driver anymore. He'd become the official navigation consultant for Cedar Ridge Search and Rescue Team. 2 evenings a week, he taught navigation, weather reading, and map analysis to volunteer teams. He finally told his wife Carmen the truth. When she asked, "Why didn't you ever tell me?" Frank said, "Nobody ever asked." Tom Anderson understood his value. "Frank, you save lives. This knowledge and experience should be shared." These powerful stories touch your heart too. Don't forget to subscribe to the Last Stand channel. We'll continue bringing you more hero stories every week. Frank Rodriguez still drives cab in Cedar Ridge today, but now everyone knows who he is. And when the weather gets bad, the townspeople ask Frank first. There's GPS, satellite navigation, but sometimes the best navigation is human experience and expertise. A man who served 25 years at sea continues serving when he comes ashore. Because real heroes never truly retire.